The sun hung low over the endless dunes of Kareth 9, painting the sand in streaks of gold and red. The human colony, a small cluster of metal domes and solar arrays, looked fragile against the vast desert. Mara Solon, the colony's leader, squinted at the horizon, her hand shielding her eyes from the glare. Something massive moved in the distance, stirring dust clouds that stretched like smoke across the dunes. The humans froze as a shadow grew larger, darker. It was no ordinary creature of the desert. Wings, jagged and enormous, beat against the air, kicking up more sand with each flap. The figure descended with power and precision, landing with a thunderous crash just outside the colony gates. The ground trembled under the weight of the landing, and even the hardy solar panels rattled in their mounts. Mara's heart skipped, but she did not scream. Around her, colonists stepped back, gripping tools and makeshift weapons, their eyes wide but calm. Among them, children clung to parents' hands, their small faces pressed against dusty sleeves. At first glance, the dragon looked terrifying, scales shimmering dark red, eyes like molten amber, claws long and sharp enough to tear steel, and horns curling like twisted spires. Yet there was something in its posture that hinted at unease, as if it had not expected what it saw. The dragon, Varkun, stepped forward slowly, his massive shadow stretching over the sand. In one clawed hand he held something. A single boot, scuffed and stained, its leather cracked. He let it fall to the sand with a heavy thump. The humans flinched, but no one ran. Mara walked forward, slowly, her boots sinking slightly into the dune. Varkun's gaze swept across the colony. He expected screams, panicked chaos, perhaps soldiers rushing to defend their homes. But instead he saw humans moving with quiet determination. A man repaired a broken water pipe without glancing at the dragon. A woman guided children to cover, her tone calm, almost casual. Mara bent down, brushing sand from the boot, and lifted it carefully. "This belonged to Elias Rook," she said. Her voice carried over the wind, steady and clear. "He's alive. Came back 2 days ago. The blood means nothing now." Varkun's eyes narrowed. He had expected fear, submission, perhaps a challenge. What he saw instead was patience and calculation. The colony did not tremble. They had faced worse and continued. And the boot, meant as a threat, now seemed meaningless. He clenched his jaw, scales rattling slightly. His presence was supposed to command obedience. The galaxy had feared him. Emperors had obeyed his orders. Yet here, on this small desert planet, his threat fell flat. The humans had survived raids, storms, heat, and starvation. They had survived without the need for wings or fire, and now they faced him, a being of destruction, and still did not falter. Mara looked up at him, her expression calm but sharp, eyes locked on his. "You came to scare us," she said. "You brought this boot thinking it would frighten us. It doesn't." Varkun flexed his claws, the sound sharp against the empty air. He wanted to roar, to let them know the power he held. But no sound came. His throat was tight. He realized he did not know what to do next. All the tactics he had used to intimidate entire fleets were useless here. These humans did not act like other species. They did not quake before him. The colonists, sensing the hesitation, continued their work. Repairs were made, supplies sorted, children guided to safe areas. There was no panic, no rush, no fear that Varkun could exploit. The dragon took a step closer, the sand shifting under his weight, but the humans did not back down. Their calmness was a shield stronger than steel. Varkun lowered his gaze to the boot once more. The leather was stained with dried blood, proof of injury, proof of struggle. But the humans had moved on. Survival had already reclaimed it. This small act of resilience disturbed the dragon more than any battle ever could. He realized that he had underestimated them. They were fragile, yes, but that fragility was a kind of strength he did not understand. Mara raised her hand slightly, a gesture not of threat but of acknowledgement. "If you are here to fight, know this," she said. "We will not run. We will not hide. We will endure. That is what humans do." The wind shifted, carrying sand in a thin haze. Varkun's wings twitched. He had come to deliver fear, but what he saw instead was endurance. He had been taught that a display of force could bend any creature. Here it had failed. The humans were not bowed. They were not pleading. They simply continued to live. A small girl, no older than 7, wandered near the edge of the colony dome, clutching a battered toy. She looked at Varkun with wide eyes but not with terror. The dragon's gaze softened ever so slightly. He remembered a time when he had been a soldier, trained to strike fear into all who opposed him. But this child, this colony, did not react as expected. They did not shrink. They did not break. Varkun shifted, wings brushing against the dunes, creating small spirals of sand. He realized that his mission, the reason he had brought the boot, was already irrelevant. The humans had survived the impossible before he even arrived. He had expected a performance of fear. Instead he found reality. The colony existed not because they were strong but because they endured. Mara took a step closer to the boot and looked directly into Varkin's glowing eyes. "You came here thinking this would scare us. You were wrong. This is our home. We protect it. That is all you need to know." For the first time in his long life, Varkin did not have an answer. The humans had survived without weapons, without armies, without fire from above. And yet they were not defeated. They simply were. The dragon looked down at the sand, at the boot, at the colony that would not bend. He realized the battle had already been lost, not to swords or claws but to something far stranger, human resilience. And somewhere deep in his scales, a seed of doubt was planted. Varkin stood on the edge of the human colony, wings folded but twitching as if they had a mind of their own. The desert wind tugged at his scales, carrying the smell of sun-baked metal and dust. He had come to Kareth 9 to prove himself, to restore the honor he had lost. But as he looked at the colony, at humans working steadily in the harsh heat, he felt something unfamiliar, uncertainty. He remembered the day he had fallen from grace. It was not from a battle lost, nor from cowardice. He had once been a high-ranking enforcer for the Draconis Empire, feared across planets, a bringer of fire and destruction. One mission had changed everything. He had been ordered to destroy a human evacuation ship stranded near the asteroid belt of Veyron 3. The ship carried civilians, men, women, and children, but also vital supplies. Varkin had watched the orders flash in crimson light on his command panel, the code unmistakable: terminate all. Leave nothing. He hesitated. For a moment, he imagined the humans screaming, the ship burning, the orders completed perfectly. His claws itched, ready to strike. But then he saw the faces on the holographic display, faces that reminded him of someone he had once called a friend. The dragon had done many terrible things, but something inside him, something he had not known existed, refused this act. Varkin had turned his engines away, guided the ship out of danger, and reported only partial success. The Empire had called it insubordination, a betrayal. His rank was stripped, his fleet reassigned to distant, barren worlds. He was demoted to patrol duty on fringe planets, far from glory. He had become a shadow of what he once was, a dragon without a name in the great history of the Draconis. And now, here he was, sent to intimidate a colony no one in the Empire had cared about before. A small desert human settlement that should have crumbled under a single display of his strength. He clenched his jaw, the sand under his talons shifting as he stepped closer to the colony dome. The humans worked around him. Mara Solon moved among them, her voice calm but sharp, directing repairs and rationing water. Children carried small tools, learning the rhythms of survival. Even the adults, though wary, showed no panic. Varkin's claws dug slightly into the sand. The humans should have feared him. They should have run or begged or screamed. Instead they continued, focused on living. He remembered the first time he had flown across the stars, wings stretching over planets, heat blazing from his throat. Power had been everything. Fear was the law. Now the law of Kareth 9 was different. It was quiet endurance. It was resilience. Varkin's mind, trained to calculate destruction, could not process it. He tried to speak, to command, but the words felt hollow. The humans did not respond in the way he expected. No one flinched. No one fell to their knees. He realized that his past victories, his reputation, meant nothing here. His name was meaningless. His strength was irrelevant. The memory of the evacuation ship weighed on him. He had risked everything to save those humans. The Empire had punished him for it. He had believed that humans were weak, fragile, and easily destroyed. And yet, in the heat and dust of Kareth 9, they proved him wrong. The colony's calm defiance was stronger than any fire he could breathe. Varkin flexed his wings, the movement stirring small storms of sand. He had once crushed fleets, toppled cities, and terrorized entire systems. Now he felt powerless before creatures that survived by stubborn hope, by cleverness, by enduring when logic said they should break. He had underestimated them as he had underestimated the humans on that long-forgotten ship. Mara stepped forward again, noticing his hesitation. "You came to scare us," she said, her voice cutting through the wind. "But you see now that fear does not rule us." Varkin lowered his head slightly. He could feel the heat of the sun on his scales, the weight of his wings, and the weight of his own mistakes pressing down. He had been trained to dominate, to destroy, to bend the galaxy to his will. Yet he could not bend this colony. He could not intimidate them with a single boot or a roar. He remembered the look on the humans' faces when they had rebuilt after raids, after storms, after sickness. They did not have armies, not true armies, not of the kind he had fought. But they had each other, and in that, he saw a strength he had never felt among his own kind. Even he, a dragon of fearsome power, felt a strange respect, a grudging admiration. Varkin's claws dug deeper into the sand, leaving grooves like scars. He looked at the boot again, the object that had seemed so powerful, so threatening when he brought it. Now it was a symbol not of fear but of the human's survival. They had moved past the danger it represented. They had endured what he thought would break them. The memory of his demotion and the humans he had saved flashed in his mind. He had believed he was protecting them out of duty, but perhaps it was something else. Curiosity, empathy, or maybe even shame at the things he had done before. The realization unsettled him. A dragon who ruled by fear could not understand these creatures fully, and yet here he was, learning without wanting to. Varkin flexed his wings once more, the sound of sand falling from the ridges of his scales. The humans continued their work, unbothered, unafraid, unbroken. The dragon realized he had a choice. He could fulfill his mission and destroy them, or he could step back and see what humans were capable of when left to themselves. For the first time in many cycles, Varkin felt uncertainty, not about his orders but about himself. The humans had survived the impossible and they would survive him too if he tried to break them. He had fallen from the sky once before, from rank and power, and now he was falling again, not in punishment but in understanding. The colony of Kareth 9 did not flinch at his presence. They endured as humans always did. And in that endurance, Varkin felt something he could not name, a stir of respect perhaps, or the faintest hint of fear for himself. The humans were unpredictable and that was what made them strong. He looked at the horizon where the dunes stretched endlessly, and realized that no empire, no command, no dragon could fully conquer this species. They had survived and they would continue to survive with or without him. Varkin lifted his head, inhaled the hot, dry air, and spread his wings slightly, feeling the strength in his body but the weakness in his assumptions. The humans were not what he expected. They were not fragile. They were something else, something more. And he would learn whether he wanted to or not what that something was. Varkin watched the humans move through the colony, their every step deliberate and calm, as if the dragon's shadow above them was nothing more than a passing cloud. Mara Solon walked among them, her presence steady, her voice soft but carrying authority. Children carried small containers of water and food, their small bodies moving quickly, yet they did not stumble or cry. The adults repaired walls, fixed solar panels and tended to the weak and sick, all without raising their eyes to the dragon. The dragon flexed his wings and shifted his weight. He had expected fear, panic, screams and chaos. Instead he saw order, focus and endurance. Each movement of the humans told him something he could not yet understand. They had faced dangers far greater than him and survived. And now they were staring at him without a trace of terror. He stepped closer to the largest dome, sand shifting under his claws. Mara noticed him but she did not stop her work. She adjusted a broken antenna, signaling to a group of colonists to lift a panel. "Hurry," she called, but there was no urgency in her voice. Just direction, calm and clear. Varkin's eyes narrowed. She was not afraid. He remembered the boot he had thrown earlier, meant to intimidate, to remind them that the galaxy feared dragons like him. Now it sat in the sand, a useless symbol. The humans had already moved past the fear it represented. Even Elias Rook, the owner of the boot, had walked back into the colony alive, carrying himself with quiet confidence, as if the blood-stained leather were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Varkin's mind raced. In every campaign he had led, fear was the weapon that broke worlds. People trembled, armies surrendered, empires bent. And yet, here on this barren planet the humans did not flinch. Their fear was not absent, it was controlled. They chose what to fear and what to endure. This was something no dragon had ever learned. He flexed his claws and tilted his head, observing a small girl climbing over sand mounds to help carry a crate. She tripped slightly but did not cry. She got up and continued. A wave of something strange passed through Varkin. Respect maybe. Confusion certainly. He had expected fragility, weakness, desperation. Instead he saw determination, resilience and quiet strength. Mara finally turned to him. "You brought the boot thinking it would scare us," she said, her tone calm. "But we are not afraid. Fear is a choice. And we choose not to let it rule us." Varkin's jaws flexed. He wanted to roar, to remind them of the fire he could bring, the destruction he could cause. Yet his voice caught in his throat. The words he had used to command fleets now seemed hollow. How could he intimidate beings who did not react as expected? Who did not bow to power? Who survived not because of strength but because they endured? He took a slow step back, trying to reassess. He had once seen an entire planet surrender under his gaze. Here these humans did not even glance at him. Their courage was not loud. It was quiet, steady, unbroken. And it unsettled him. A man, older than the others, carried supplies from the storage dome to the water collection point. His movements were careful, yet efficient. When a strong gust of wind nearly toppled a stack of containers, he steadied them without panic. Another colonist noticed a crack in the solar panel and began repairing it without hesitation. No words were exchanged about the dragon above, as if he were invisible. Varkun flexed his wings again, creating a small cloud of sand. He remembered the humans he had spared years ago on the evacuation ship. They had survived too, despite the odds. He had saved them because of something inside him that defied the Empire's orders. Now he watched a colony survive the impossible without him, and he felt the same stirring. He could not destroy them, not fully, not without seeing the impossible happen again. He bent lower, closer to the sand, trying to understand. Fear was not absent here, it had been chosen carefully. These humans had been through storms, attacks, scarcity, and disease, yet they were alive and thriving. They did not react to his shadow with panic because they had already decided what was worth fearing. And he, a creature of terror, was not among those things. A small girl approached him cautiously, holding a makeshift toy. She looked up at his glowing eyes and he expected fear. But there was none. She tilted her head curiously and said nothing, then turned and ran back to help another child carry water. Varkun's massive claws clenched slightly, not in anger but in confusion. These humans were unlike any creature he had ever faced. They did not bend, break, or flee. They endured, and that endurance was stronger than any fire, sharper than any claw. He shifted his gaze back to Mara. She walked slowly toward the boot, brushing sand off its surface. "You came here thinking you could scare us with a symbol of death," she said. "We have already survived what it represents. That is why we are not afraid. That is why you cannot break us." Varkun's wings twitched, creating a small vortex of sand around him. He had expected submission, for the humans to tremble, for the colony to crumble. And yet the colony had not even faltered. They worked, they adapted, they endured. The dragon felt a strange unease growing in him. This mission, his purpose here, was losing meaning. He looked over the humans again. Each face showed calm, focus, and determination. None of them begged, none of them screamed. They chose what to fear and what to endure, and he, the mighty Varkun, had become irrelevant. The realization settled heavy on him. Fear, which had once been his greatest weapon, was useless here. These humans were unshakable because they had already survived worse than dragons. And in that, Varkun felt something he had never felt before: uncertainty, perhaps even doubt. He did not know how to break a species that refused to bend, that refused to let fear rule them. For a long moment he simply watched. The humans moved with quiet strength, small acts of endurance forming a chain stronger than any army he had commanded. They were unafraid because they had learned to survive, to adapt, and to choose what mattered. Varkun understood at last that his fire, his claws, his rank, and his reputation meant nothing to them. And somewhere deep inside him, a small part of his old pride and certainty began to crumble. He had thought himself a master of fear, but here, on the dunes of Kareth 9, he was learning a new truth. Humans were stronger than fear, and that strength was something even a dragon could not conquer. Varkun stood at the edge of the colony, wings stretched wide, shadow falling over the domes like a storm that never came. He had watched the humans for hours, their calm, their persistence, their quiet strength. Each small act of survival had pierced through the certainty he had carried for centuries. He had come to Kareth 9 to intimidate and destroy. That mission was clear. His orders were clear. But now, standing above the colony, he felt a conflict he had never known. From the sky came the signal he had dreaded. The Draconis command fleet appeared beyond the dunes, their sleek ships hovering above the colony like predators. Red lights flashed across his vision as orders crackled through the comms in his mind. Crush them. Destroy the settlement. Prove your loyalty, Varkun. The words were familiar. They carried the weight of his past victories, the pride of being feared across star systems. The dragon felt the old instinct rise within him, the urge to strike, to burn, to assert power. Yet when he looked down at the humans, something stopped him. They were not afraid. They were working together, moving with quiet purpose and standing tall in the desert sun. Varkun flexed his wings, sand tumbling from their edges. He remembered the evacuation ship, the humans he had saved, the punishment he had suffered for refusing orders before. And now here again the Empire demanded destruction. The choice before him was clear: obey and reclaim some fragment of honor, or refuse and risk everything. He hovered above the colony, the wind whipping around him. Mara Solon emerged from the domes, her hands empty, her stance calm. "You have a choice," she said softly, as if speaking to a friend instead of a dragon. "You can obey your commanders and burn us, or you can see what we are capable of and learn instead. Fear is not our law here." Varkin's gaze swept over the colony. Children carried water containers across shifting sand. Adults repaired solar panels, patched walls, tended to the sick. Nothing about them suggested panic or surrender. They did not even glance at the fleet above. Their endurance was quiet but unyielding. His mind, trained for destruction, struggled to process this. The comms crackled again. "Varkun. Destroy them now. Prove your loyalty." The words were harsh, cold, unyielding. The fleet waited for him to strike. The dragon clenched his claws, feeling the power in his body, the heat in his throat. He could destroy the colony with a single strike. Yet he could not bring himself to do it. He remembered Elias Rook, the human whose boot he had thrown into the sand. Alive, unbroken, defiant. He remembered Mara's words, the way the colonists had moved without fear. He had once believed humans fragile, weak, simple. Now he realized he had been wrong. They endured, adapted, survived against all odds. Even he, a dragon of fire and terror, could not break them. Varkin made a decision. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his gaze away from the colony and toward the horizon, where the Dracarys fleet waited. His wings shifted, creating a small whirlwind of sand around him. "I will not obey," he said aloud, the words carrying through the desert air. The fleet paused, engines humming, waiting for the strike that would never come. The humans below watched silently, unsure of what the dragon would do. Mara took a step forward, sensing the change. "You do not need to fight us," she said, voice calm. "You are free to choose. That is what we all do here." Varkin's eyes glowed brighter for a moment and then dimmed. He felt the weight of centuries of training, of orders, of fear pressing against him. But he remembered something stronger: the resilience of humans, the endurance of Careth 9, the quiet defiance of beings who had no weapons but willpower. And in that he found a new strength. He spread his wings wide and let out a deep, resonant roar, not a roar of threat but a roar of defiance. The sound echoed across the dunes, shaking sand from the ridges, and reaching the hovering Dracari fleet. It was a signal, clear and unmistakable. He would not follow orders that demanded injustice. The fleet hesitated, confused. A single dragon defying the Empire was not impossible, but rare. Varkin's voice carried authority not because of fear, but because of choice. He was no longer the enforcer who obeyed blindly. He was a dragon who had seen something different, something worth protecting or at least not destroying. Below, the colonists continued their work, noticing the shift in the dragon above but not changing their actions. Their calm endurance remained unbroken. Varkin watched them, understanding slowly that their strength lay not in fire or weapons but in their choices. They chose not to fear, they chose to survive, and they chose to live. The dragon looked back at the Dracari fleet one last time. Orders flashed, engines hummed, but he knew he had already made his decision. He would not destroy the colony. He would not obey commands that demanded their suffering. He had fallen once from grace, punished for refusing to harm humans. Now he fell again, but this time, it was a choice born not of punishment, but of understanding. Varkin's shadow stretched long over the dunes as he hovered. The humans had survived the impossible without him. They had endured the storms of the desert, the scarcity of water, the threats of raiders. And now, they endured the presence of a dragon who had come to destroy them but chose not to. Mara approached the boot again, kneeling slightly in the sand. "You see now," she said quietly, "what we are. We survive even when the world expects us to fail. That is all we do. We endure because we must." Varkin's gaze softened, and for the first time he felt something like respect or perhaps awe. The humans had survived without armies, without power, without weapons strong enough to match him. Yet they endured. That endurance was stronger than any command, stronger than any fire, stronger than fear itself. He lifted off slightly, feeling the wind beneath his wings. He was no longer a tool of destruction, no longer a weapon to prove loyalty. He was something new, a dragon who had chosen differently. The Dracari fleet would leave, uncertain what to do with a subordinate who defied orders. But Varkin's choice was clear. The humans had not asked for his protection and he would not impose it. He would watch, learn, and understand. For the first time in centuries, Varkin did not feel fear, and the humans below did not fear him. The desert wind carried the quiet hum of life across the dunes. And somewhere deep in his chest, the dragon felt a shift, a stirring he had never known, the recognition that choice, endurance, and will could be stronger than fire or claw. Kareth 9 had survived, not by weapons, not by power, but by the quiet strength that refused to break. And Varkin, the dragon who had come to intimidate, had changed. He would never be the same again. The desert was quiet now, the wind stirring small waves of sand across the dunes. The Draconis fleet hung on the horizon, unsure what to do with a dragon who had defied their orders. Varkin hovered above the human colony, wings folding slowly, his massive body casting a shadow that stretched over the domes. He had chosen not to attack. He had chosen not to obey. And for the first time in his long life, he felt the weight of a decision made for something other than fear or power. Mara Solon walked through the colony, her boots sinking slightly into the sand. The colonists followed her lead, repairing broken walls, tending to crops in small soil patches, carrying water from solar distillation units. Nothing had changed in their routine, not even with a dragon hovering above. They moved with quiet focus, with the same calm endurance they had shown from the moment Varkin had arrived. The dragon watched them, trying to understand what made these humans so different. They had survived storms, raids, starvation, and now the presence of a being of fire and power, and yet they remained unbroken. No one begged. No one pleaded. No one ran. They simply continued to live. Varkin flexed his claws and lowered himself toward the sand. He had once crushed entire cities, fleets, and empires. Yet here, on this small desert planet, he felt powerless against their endurance. Power, he realized, was not always in destruction. Sometimes, it was in surviving when destruction was expected. The Draconis fleet hovered uncertainly, engines humming, lights flashing commands that Varkin ignored. His defiance had not been an act of rebellion for glory. It had been an act of understanding. He had learned something about humans that no command, no order, no fire could teach him. They were unpredictable, resilient, and unyielding. From the main dome, Mara stepped forward, holding the blood-stained boot. It had been meant as a warning, a symbol of fear. Now it lay in the sand, insignificant. "They sent you to test us," she said softly to Varkin. "To see if fear could break us. But we have already survived worse. You see it now. That is all you need to know." Varkin lowered his massive head and gazed across the colony. Children ran across small paths between domes, carrying buckets of water. Adults moved together in small teams, repairing equipment, tending to the weak, and still not one of them flinched. He realized that the humans did not need him to survive. They had endured long before he arrived and would endure long after he left. The Draconis fleet began to withdraw, engines pulsing as if uncertain how to handle a dragon who had refused their orders. Their messages crackled in Varkin's mind, demanding loyalty, obedience, and proof of power. He ignored them. Loyalty to fear was not what he wanted. Power through destruction had no meaning here. He had seen the strength of humans, and it was something the galaxy had underestimated. Varkin spread his wings wide one last time, creating a swirl of sand across the dunes. The humans continued their work, noticing him but not changing their actions. He realized that this quiet endurance was stronger than armies, stronger than fire, stronger than fear. It was a force the galaxy could not destroy, a law the Empire could not bend. Mara approached the dragon slowly, her voice calm. "You see what we are," she said. "Not weapons, not armies, not fire, but something else. We endure. That is all we ever do. And that is why you cannot break us." Varkin lowered himself to the ground, his massive body settling into the sand. For the first time he felt humility, a strange recognition of human strength. The humans had survived not because they were strongest, but because they refused to yield to fear. Their quiet determination, their simple persistence, was stronger than any dragon, any fleet, any empire. He looked back at the horizon where the Draconis fleet now pulled away slowly. They would report his disobedience, his defiance, his refusal to destroy a human colony. But the dragon no longer cared. What mattered was here, on this planet, in the actions of the humans who had survived the impossible without him. The colonists continued their work, carrying water, repairing domes, tending to small gardens that would feed them, and checking children to make sure they were safe. Their focus never wavered. They had faced death and hardship before, and they would face it again. Nothing could break them because they had learned to survive without relying on fear. Varkin felt something stir deep inside him, a respect unlike anything he had felt for any creature in the galaxy. He had come to intimidate, to command, to enforce fear. Instead, he had learned humility, endurance, and the strength of choice. Humans chose to survive, and in that choice they became stronger than any empire could measure. The small boot lay in the sand, the symbol of what could have been a threat now meaningless. The humans had already moved past it. They had already survived the danger it represented. Varkan realized that he, a dragon of centuries, had become irrelevant to them. They did not need him. They did not fear him. They simply endured, and in that endurance, they had defeated expectations, assumptions, and even fear itself. The sun dipped lower in the sky, turning the dunes gold and crimson. Varkan rose slowly, wings stretching, taking flight above the colony. He would leave Kareth 9, but the lesson he carried would remain. Across the galaxy, others would continue to underestimate humans, but here on the dunes a truth had been written. Humans endured when others expected them to break. The humans did not cheer, did not celebrate, and did not demand recognition. They continued their work, living simply, surviving wisely, enduring patiently. Varkan watched them until they were small figures against the vast dunes. He had expected fear and chaos. What he found was something greater: resilience, endurance, and quiet strength. And in that quiet strength, the galaxy would one day understand a new truth. Humans could not be broken by fire, claws, or intimidation. They survived because they chose to endure. They survived because they refused to be ruled by fear. And even dragons, mighty and terrifying, could learn that lesson too. Kareth 9 would remain a small colony, unnoticed by most of the galaxy. Yet its story of humans who refused to yield would ripple outward. Varkan, a dragon who had fallen twice from power, carried the memory of their endurance wherever he flew. The galaxy had learned, even if slowly, that humanity was not to be underestimated. They endured when others failed. They survived when others fell. They were a force not of destruction but of quiet, unyielding life. The desert wind carried the sound of work, of survival, of life. The humans of Kareth 9 continued, unbroken, unafraid, and unstoppable in their simple, determined way. Varkan soared higher, looking back one last time. He had come to conquer, and instead he had witnessed something far stronger. The galaxy had learned what humans were capable of. And in the sand below, life endured, quietly, persistently, and impossibly strong.